Penn State position previews for 2019 next on Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We got Tim Aiden on the line breaking down Penn State football position by position as we get you set for 2019. Of course, help us build the channel by grabbing the Amazon link in the description section below and doing your shopping right there. We've just finished a live stream on Patreon at the Voice of College Football Community, so please join us right there. 2 exclusive live streams per week where I react to your comments. We've received over 36,000 this year, 36,000 comments from you. I react to your comments. The other live stream is I bring you, the fan, the viewer, part of our community, on to talk college football each and every week. All right, let's talk about those wide receivers, Tim, because I've been impressed with the wide receivers in terms of recruiting rankings, in terms of physical specimens, and being the guys that, and I'm going back to Chris Godwin a few years ago and some of those players that played in the Rose Bowl in that breakout season. But when it comes down to it, they just didn't make the simple plays a lot of the times. And Juwan Johnson was probably the best example of that. He plucked the touchdown pass in the back of the end zone that beat Iowa on the road. He made one of the greatest catches you're ever going to see against Ohio State on the sideline early in that game. But when the ball was right in the breadbasket, he and a number of other receivers couldn't find the handle. DeAndre Tompkins, another guy that moves on after a productive career. So set us up with KJ Hamler and the rest of the bunch at wide receiver.
Well, I mean, KJ Hamler, obviously the biggest returning name from last year, and he made a name for himself right off the bat in his first game off the red shirt in a spectacular fashion when he took a kickoff back to midfield with Penn State trailing by a touchdown, about a minute or so to play against App State. And it was one of those, as you remember probably, he catches it in the end zone, hesitates. He thinks he's about to take a knee and just hit the 25. But last second hesitates. And I can just remember, I was at the game, I just remember screaming no at the top of my lungs when he's about to take it out. But then sure enough, makes the first guy miss at the 5 and then takes off and takes it out to about midfield, and that was critical because it gave Trace and company a shorter field in which to operate and score the game-tying touchdown and ultimately win in overtime. So there was that. Then the following week at Pitt, he scores helps Penn State get a touchdown their opening drive with taking a nice little jet sweep about 30 yards into the end zone, and he made some. Just throughout the season, he made some spectacular. Of course, Ohio State, he had the 90-yard screen pass touchdown to, put them up 13-zip, and they seemingly had all the momentum going for them. That one ended. I won't get into that, but throughout the season, he was making some big play. But I think part of the problem was I just think there weren't. I'm hoping one way we've seen improvement this season is that the staff finds more ways to get the ball in his hands. I understand the offensive system they operate, which is, Ricky Ronnie, the offensive coordinator, is using the same system that Joe Moorhead was using. So it doesn't necessarily emphasize just getting it to one guy. It's supposed to spread the ball around, ideally. But a guy like KJ with his talents, you want to try and have him get, probably upwards of about 10 touches a game if he can, maybe more. And so I'm hoping they get to feed him the ball a little more often. The other big returning weapon the tight end position, receiving wise though, the other big weapon returning is Pat Freiermuth, who had an amazing freshman year. He caught 8 touchdowns, had 368 yards receiving, caught 8 touchdowns, and so he became a favorite target of Trace's. When most of his other receivers were dropping passes, it was Pat Freiermuth who was coming down with some big time catches. So he's another guy to look out for. And another tight end, 5th-year senior Nick Bowers, who is a guy who has been dealing with injuries most of his career, but he was healthy last year, and at times towards the end of last season he made some big catches, and he's a guy that, if he stays healthy, you could see a lot of 2 tight end sets this year for Penn State. you got a pair of guys both over 6'5" who can catch and block real well, which is something you don't typically see in a tight end. It's usually one or the other, but these guys do both those things real well. So it could be kind of like, what Iowa had last year with Noah Fant, TJ Hawkinson, a pair of killer tight ends like that. Also, Jahan Dotson, a name you may remember from later in this season. He has not caught a touchdown pass yet, but he did come up with some clutch catches last year. Most notably to me was he caught a couple fourth down catches against Iowa, which helped extend drives that ended up being touchdowns. And Penn State pulled that one out by the skin of their teeth. So he's been a difference maker, even if he hasn't gotten in the end zone yet. And I do think he'll find the end zone, several times this season if I were a betting man. Name that's kind of maybe been a little bit forgotten, Justin Shorter, former #1 receiver in the 2018 class. And he dealt with an injury. He got injured during fall practice last year and during two-a-days, and that really just set back his ability to play. And he didn't, he saw action here and there, but ultimately ended up preserving his red shirt because he only played in 3 or 4 games. But towards the end of last season, he started to see more action, and from what it sounds like, he's healthy now. He's got a full off season in the weight training program. So, hopefully he will be able to live up to the hype this season. And if he can do that, it would really go a long way towards, boosting the receiving core as far as, showing improvement in 2019. Another name to a couple other names for out here, Daniel George. I think I mentioned him when we talked about the quarterbacks. He was on the receiving end of Sean Clifford's school record-setting 95-yard touchdown pass in garbage time against Kent State. And he's a guy who, he was a blue chip recruit as well. Got a little underlooked, probably from being shadowed out by Dotson and Hamler and Shorter. But he's a guy to keep an eye on. If he can be a reliable receiver, then again, it goes a long way towards making Jared Parker, the receivers coach, life a lot easier. And the other name to remember, Weston Carr. He's a Division II transfer from Azusa Pacific. He's a grad transfer. And I'm going to look up his stats real quick here. He had if you look at his highlight tapes, he really did torch the competition at the D2 level. And and he's looking to showcase his skills against some stiffer competition. Now, I don't expect him to be a regular, but I think if he can just be a reliable set of hands, he's a guy who can maybe work his way into the rotation. Some guy who catches a few passes here and there to extend drives. That's all he asks for out of him. If he can add anything else, that's gravy to me. So that's the rundown on the court. A lot to improve on from last year, but there is definitely potential, especially now with Jared Parker coaching receivers, a guy who's got a good reputation in that department. I know it seemed Duke fans were sad to see him go. So I'm hopeful they'll see a nice bounce back year after a very tough 2018.
See, I think your last couple statements there, Tim, are key in this, because to the fan who doesn't lock in on Penn State every week, again, on the surface, it appears as though that this team is going to be lacking in offensive production next season. But I think if you really look at it, and we're going to kind of unpeel this narrative as we go through the various positions, and once we get to the defense, we're going to see that they could really have a special unit there. But offensively, the logical thinking is you miss one of your best players of all time, Trace McSorley. Even though you had issues dropping the football at wide receiver, you lose guys that we've become accustomed to seeing in Tompkins and Johnson. And those guys are gone and replaced by guys that are unfamiliar to people outside the Penn State community. You lose your number one running back, of course, Miles Sanders. But with the strength of the tight ends, which are exceptional, as you mentioned, and Freiermuth only caught 26 passes, but as you outlined, 8 touchdowns, and most of those were very important catches. Tight game against Indiana, he caught a touchdown. The nail biter against Iowa, caught a touchdown against Ohio State, caught a touchdown in the Citrus Bowl against Kentucky. He was there, as you mentioned, in the key moments, key situations for big plays, and Trace McSorley certainly looked at him as a security blanket. The tight end position is fortified, and the wide receivers, if they just go out there and do their job, run the routes and catch the passes, they don't have to be extra dynamic. They're going to take away a number of drops in key situations if they can just secure the football. So this offense, and with Sean Clifford being a better downfield thrower, it's going to be intriguing to see how it all comes together, because it could be a better offense for a team that's known for offense. But as you know better than I do, it kind of transitioned last year where, because of Trace's injury and the drop passes, no Saquon, the offense wasn't as dynamic as it had been in 2016 and 17, and the defense is becoming much better. Getting our Penn State breakdown from Tim Aiden from Black Shoe Diaries. I encourage everyone to join him and the rest of the staff there on SB Nation to track Penn State football as we get you set for 2019. We have wrapped up the quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends. We'll have Tim back to break down the rest of the positions for Penn State entering 2019. Tim, we appreciate you stopping by as always.
Sure thing, Mark. Thanks for having me.